What's going on, everybody? The Original Mako back with some more Roboquest content, and today we have the first guide going up for Roboquest, and seems like a pretty good one to be my first guide. It is going to be some beginner tips and tricks, some tips to help you possibly win your first run. Basically some things that, like, going into the game I wish I knew before my first few runs. Most of the stuff it took me multiple runs through to figure out, or it took me a lot of health to figure out, so hopefully these tips help you guys out. If they do, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Make sure to smash that subscribe button. We set a pretty lofty goal a while ago. By June of next year, I'd like to be at 1,000 subscribers. And I know it's a stretch, but the support has been crazy so far, so let's keep it up, right? You guys have been amazing. So thank you guys for that. Also, check the links in the description. Twitch.tv/TheOriginalMako if you want to see me do runs live or figure this stuff out live. You can check that out. The Discord as well if you want to hang out, chat with some cool people. We got a lot of fun stuff going on. A 12-hour cosplay stream coming up. A 24-hour charity stream coming up. So you're going to want to be in there for all that type of stuff. And I'll be making an announcement on YouTube when all that's coming up. But, yeah, thank you guys. Hopefully you enjoy this guide. And I will catch you guys in the next one. So here we are with tip number 1, and probably the most important tip. So as I'm killing these enemies, I want you guys to look at what happens after they die. You see these blue orbs that come down? So when I first started playing, I was extremely confused at what those blue orbs were. So let me show you. They will actually, if you don't pick them up, I'll let you guys see this, they will expire. And it's not after it doesn't take too long for them to expire. And some of you might be able to infer better than I did, but there is a level up mechanic in this game. So I'll try to get to a point where I level up and kind of show you guys. How the level up system works. So every time you level up, you're going to be getting an option to choose from either a perk or a specific upgrade. Oh, what the heck? Oh, as you can see, I just missed those ones. So it's going to be kind of my main point here, is that you need to be mindful of which enemies you're killing and, like, how far away they are. Like, yeah, it's usually a good idea to take out some of the stronger enemies first, but if they're too far away, it might be better to just take out the ones near you and then work backwards, like a very linear system, because you're gonna want to get as much XP as possible. The more you level up, the more likely you are to win a run, and that's like a fact. When you level up, your damage increases, your health increases automatically, and then you get to choose a perk first. So a lot of different options you can choose from, but I have this leveled up. In the beginning, you have 2 options you can choose from, but these options are extremely helpful in helping you win runs. So that being said, you want to be gathering these EXP orbs. So, like, if I say, oh, this guy's kind of a problem, and I shoot and kill him, and then I still have a ton of enemies in front of me that need to kill, and then I'm like, oh, like, I need to get over here, and then you don't have enough time to get it, that's a huge loss. Losing any EXP orbs is kind of massive. So you want to be shooting enemies closer to you rather than farther to you, at least in the beginning, until you kind of understand how the progression system works and, like, you get a feel for how much time you have before the orbs expire. So that being said, there is a very important type of room. Let me kind of show you if I can find one. You saw it earlier, the skateboard rails. So the skateboard rails are not only really good movement for you, but they're actually, enemies will almost always spawn on them if they're in a room. It's a very specific enemy that all it's going to do is try to get to the other side of the skateboard rail before you kill it. If you happen to kill it, you will get a huge drop of XP. And they're going to move pretty fast at first, but once they take damage, they will slow down. So it's not like you're just completely out of luck, but you do need to try to hit it as early as possible so it doesn't get all the way across. And I'm not really finding any examples of it, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut to when I see one, and I'll show you guys that. Alright, so here we are with an example of the skateboard rail. You can see it's kind of highlighted in blue right now. So when I walk in, there's the enemy. It's trying to get to the other side. If you stop it, look at that XP. You get a ton of XP orbs. So killing him is super important. The problem is, obviously, you are going to have to collect those XP orbs for it to, you know, mean anything. So the earlier you kill it, the better chance you are, you're going to have to actually collect the XP orbs, because the farther into the room they get, the more likely there's going to be a lot of enemies guarding the path or getting in your way. So that's kind of the main gist of those guys. Just try to kill them quick. Worst case scenario, you kill them later, but make sure you kill them and make sure you get that XP. Even if you have to take a little bit of damage for it, it is 100% going to end up being worth it. Tip number 2 for you guys, and this is also a very important one because, as you can tell, this game is very fast paced, right? Tip number 2 is being mindful of your movement. So right now I am sprinting around, double jumping, showing off how fast you can go, stuff like that. In gunfights, in combat, you're going to want to be using your slide, this power slide mechanic, which I believe by default is bound to control. Oops. And you're going to want to be sliding to dodge bullets more often than not. Every bullet in this game you can easily avoid with a slide. Now, obviously, sometimes you might slide into other bullets, but sliding is usually better than sprinting to try to avoid, mainly because when you sprint, obviously you can't ready up your weapon until you stop sprinting. So if you slide, you can be shooting while you're sliding. You can slide backwards, forward. You can slide like in midair. You can start the slide animation, but you can slide in every direction. You can shoot while you're sliding. It's a more effective way of kind of moving around the map, right? And it's very important and will help you a lot, and kind of ties into one of the tips that I have later for you guys. But that's tip number 2. Movement, be mindful of it. Power slide is more important than sprinting. The next tip I have for you guys, tip number 3, is elemental effects. So just like in Gunfire Reborn, there are multiple different elemental effects in this game. There is cryo, there is shock, and there is burn. I'm going to try to find examples of each here. So this first example, my bullets are currently, if I press tab in the upper right, you can see my perk. My bullet damage also deals shock damage and allows you to stun targets. That's not a special thing with this perk. Every time you deal shock damage, you can stun the target. So if your gun, for example, in the right side of my screen, if damage type was shock damage, if the damage type was shock damage, that means every time you shoot that weapon, you have a chance to stun enemies. So as you can see right there, that lightning bolt strikes, and that stuns the enemy. With the flying ones, it just kind of kills them. But with every other enemy, it will stop them from shooting, it'll stop them from doing anything, and it gives you a chance to kill them while they can't even shoot you. So shock is super, super useful. And for some reason, there is like a lot of perks that seem to go really well with shock as opposed to the other 2 inscriptions. But yeah, so keep that in mind as well. It does seem to me that shock is also more common than the other 2 inscriptions, so maybe that's why. But hopefully I will be able to find an example of burn, which does damage over time, and cryo, which makes enemies slower and eventually freezes them. But this was the example of shock. And using these elemental effects to your advantage is just as important as it is in Gunfire Reborn. Although there's no elemental mixing, but these elements do affect the run in a very, very significant way. Okay, so for the next elemental effect, this is the example of one that uses the cryo damage type, as you can see in the bottom right. The ice gun Obviously, by the name of it, you could assume it's going to do cryo damage, but let me just show you guys an example of what it does. So as you can see, their health bar turns blue, and now he is extremely slow, and slowly it will wear off until he is back to normal. So I'll try to get a good example of once you apply enough stacks, you will fully freeze an enemy. Not quite. We didn't have enough. Hold on. None of these enemies have quite enough health. But when you stack enough stacks of cryo, enemies will just be completely frozen solid for a short time until it slowly wears off. And it's a very good effect because you can tell, like, they significantly slow down. Like, whoa. Like, they don't shoot, they don't really move, they don't do a lot of stuff that they would normally be doing. So they're a lot easier to hit, a lot easier to dodge. Makes your life a whole lot easier. So that is an example of cryo damage. And finally, the last example of the third elemental type is burn. As you can see, I currently have literally a flamethrower, and the damage type says burn. So basically, once again, this is basically kind of how burn works in any other game. You're going to be doing damage over time. This one actually has an affix that increases the damage over time by 50%. So let me just show you guys. Their health bar turns red, and they will tick for damage over time. It's nothing crazy, but you can get some perks that do make it a little bit crazy. Like I said, shock by far has the most perks that go with it, but shock also has the most weapons that go with it as well. So hopefully we'll see that change in the future, and I'm sure we will. Like I said, they're very early in development, and they have a lot of stuff coming. But yeah, burn, just a very simple damage over time. So like I said, look out for all this stuff because these are very potent effects. All three of them have their uses, and all three of them can be very helpful in winning your runs. So that's it for the elemental effect types. We'll move on to the next tip. The next tip that I have for you, tip number 4, is pay attention to the secondary abilities on weapons. Like this weapon, for example, you can see it tells you the damage type, the crit, the reload type, all that type of stuff, but below it, it has an extra little tier there that says explosive grenade launcher and gives the right click symbol. If something has the right click symbol, that means it's going to have a secondary ability. So let's pick it up and show what one without it looks like. So this is one without a secondary ability. It doesn't have that second tier below it. So this weapon, the right click, is actually a grenade launcher, and it will scale with your explosive damage. It'll work with any of your explosive synergies, and it'll do all that type of stuff. So the big idea here is that weapons with a secondary ability, as you can see, there's only 3 bullets left, and it's not regenerating. So with secondary abilities, they will actually not regenerate. You have to have ammo to do it. And how do you get ammo, you might ask? Well, you know the EXP orbs that are all over the ground. There's also 2 other types of orbs that can drop from enemies. One of them was that purple one that you just saw. The purple one is actually the ammo orb. So the ammo orb will actually refill a little bit of that ammo. The other orb that can drop is a green orb, and that is a health orb, and that will obviously restore some of your health. So why is this so important? Well, like I said, these secondary abilities, especially if it's like an explosive one or what have you, are usually A, fairly useful in most situations, and then B, they're also very good because they scale with your other synergies. So with this weapon, for example, if I had a crazy demolition build going or a really high technology build, this weapon would be, or the secondary ability would be hitting even harder than the primary ability, and I might honestly want to use it more often than I use the primary ability. So it's just important to keep in mind that is always a possibility. Always know what your secondary abilities are on weapons. They can make a huge difference in your runs. And the final tip that I have for you guys, tip number 5, is to focus on your cores. Your cores is kind of like the main part of the run. That's probably why it's called, cores, because it's the core of the run. But anyways, you can only equip 3 at a time. And the main thing to note here is you don't necessarily just want to pump as much as you can into, like right now I'm using a demolition weapon and I have plus 10 demolition. You don't necessarily want to just pump demolition as much as possible, because a lot of the times, like, both of these weapons do explosive damage. So technology has a secondary ability of increasing your explosion size. So you probably want to have technology in there as well. For me personally, I don't melee things very often. So the fact that I have plus 8 on my assault and I have plus 16% melee damage means absolutely nothing to me. And it doesn't help the run in any way. So you need to be mindful of the secondary abilities for each different core. Assault secondary ability gives melee attack damage. Precision secondary ability gives crit damage. Demolition secondary ability is fire rate. And technology secondary ability is explosion size. You want to have all 4 of those down so you know which weapons you want certain stuff with. Just because it's a demolition weapon doesn't necessarily mean you need to put as much into demolition as possible. Doing more damage with it is going to be nice, but now I also have literally 0 as my explosion size is going to be nothing. So I'm not going to be doing any AoE effects or anything like that at all, because I haven't put anything into technology. So it's important to know what the secondary stats are for each of your cores, because each different weapon will have its own thing it wants to do. Maybe you need increased fire rate. You're using an assault weapon, you want a higher fire rate, so you want to build assault and demolition. Usually trying to build 2 things at once is the ideal scenario from what I've found so far. So trying to have at least 2 that you're speccing into pretty high is a good idea. So once again, those tips were experience orbs. Make sure you get them. Make sure you're killing enemies closer to you rather than farther than you, so you can be collecting as many experience orbs as possible. Next one, sliding versus sprinting. In combat, you want to be sliding more often than you are sprinting. It's better for it. You're going to be dodging stuff more often if you use that tip. Once you get a feel for how the movement works, you'll have your own little system of dodging. But for beginners, I would suggest sliding as opposed to just sprinting around, because you can have your weapon up. You can do a lot more stuff that way. Next, we had the different elemental effects. So once again, shock, cryo, and burn. Those are the things you're going to want to be paying attention to. They are very important, just like they are in gunfire. Each does its own thing. Each has its own style. Figure out what you like and mess around with it. Fourth, we had secondary weapon abilities. Make sure you know if your weapon has a secondary ability. If it does, make sure you're using it. They're very good. There's a reason it's on there, and you're going to want to be doing that more often than not. And the last tip, just went over it. Make sure you know the secondary ability of your cores as well. The core of the run, your cores are very important. Have that second ability in your mind so you know which 2 you want to be building. It's not just going to be cut and dry as let's get as much demolition or assault or technology damage as I can. There's going to be other things you want to pay attention to as well. Hopefully these tips help you guys with it. Maybe you'll be able to win your first run, or maybe you've been having some trouble. Hopefully these tips will help you guys improve in your runs. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Make sure to check those links in the description. Like I said, Twitch, Discord is down there. You're going to want to catch these runs live. Trust me. We have a lot of fun on Twitch. So thank you guys. I appreciate all the support. Have a good rest of your day. Have good days for the rest of the week. Until I see you guys again. And we will catch you guys in the next video.